Today I'm going to be talking all about Paphiopedilum orchids, a really easy care orchid with an extremely unique flower. Welcome back to Mind the Leaves. If this is your first time joining us, then welcome. We are super happy that you're here. The flowers of Paph orchids are extremely unique. The lower lip petal actually forms a full pouch, which gives it its alternate name, slipper orchid. The flowers can be extremely long lasting. Under good conditions, you can get a Paph orchid flower to last maybe about 1 or 2 months, which is amazing. They are slow growers though. Each fan can only throw up 1 flower spike, and on that flower spike is usually only 1 single flower. And it can take a single fan about 1 or 2 years to fully mature to be able to bloom. So sadly, they don't bloom that often, but when they do, it is spectacular. The life cycle of a Paph is basically that it will grow a fan. When that fan is mature, it will send up a flower spike and bloom. And at that time, it will also start sending out new growths. And as the new growth starts to become a mature fan, you will see the older growth start to die away. The leaves on the old growth start to turn a bit yellow, and then eventually completely brown. At this point, you can just cut these right off. They're not doing any good to the plant, but they are very hard to pull off, so you will have to cut them. But when it's just sort of turning yellow, I know it's kind of ugly, but it's best to leave it and just let all of the energy go back into the plant before you cut it off. So unlike a Phalenopsis orchid like this one that just keeps growing and growing new leaves and pushing out multiple flower spikes from the same fan, Paphs grow, bloom, and die back, but hopefully eventually forming a clump. On this one here, you can see that it only formed 1 new growth, so I've got 1 good looking fan here, and then the other one is just dying back. But on another one like this one here, you can see that it actually has 2 fans pushing, and that's great because this one is much farther on its way to becoming a full clump, and I might even get 2 blooms from this one. So that is a really great tip when you're shopping for Paphiopedilum orchids, because they're usually sold in bloom. So when you're shopping around, check the base of the fan and see if you can find one that has 2 little growths coming out instead of just 1. And if you can do that, that is a great deal, and you're well on your way to forming a clump. And because Paphs don't bloom very often, I really appreciate its beautiful mottled leaves. Now, not all Paphiopedilums have this, but the mottled leaf Paphs are definitely my favorite for this reason. Unlike your classic Phalenopsis orchid, which I don't think is unattractive in any way without its bloom, I just don't think it's spectacular like I find the Paphiopedilum foliage. So even when these guys aren't in bloom, I'm always coming up to look at them because I just think that they're really, really pretty. Just look at these leaves. Okay, now that we've talked about all that good stuff, let's get into the care for Paphiopedilum orchids. So for light, Paphiopedilum orchids are going to appreciate some bright indirect light. Now you can give them morning sun. I actually keep mine in an east-facing window, and they do very well for me. So a little bit of sun is okay, but make sure that their leaves aren't getting hit by any of that harsh sunlight. Their leaves will burn. And I haven't personally tried this, but I know that a lot of Paph growers have had great success growing them just under fluorescent tube lighting. So they're really, really easy. For watering, these guys are going to be different than your classic Phalenopsis orchid. With a Phalenopsis orchid, you really want to make sure that it's completely dried out before you water it again, but with Paphs, they don't like to completely dry out. They like to just almost dry out and then you water them. So what I like to do with mine is I soak them for about 10 minutes once a week. If you live in a hotter climate, then you might have to water more often than that. I just use tap water with my Paphiopedilum orchids and they do great. They're really not picky, and I have read that they really like the calcium. They are extremely forgiving plants, so while you are kind of learning to work with them, they'll forgive you. The only thing that they really don't like is to get really dry for a long time or to have wet feet, so don't let them sit in water. Something I don't do myself, but I think is potentially a really good idea, is that some growers will actually flush the substrate with water from the tap, holding it under the tap for at least 10 seconds and letting all the water flow through that way. Apparently it really helps bring oxygen to the roots. Okay, fertilizer for these guys. So they will appreciate some fertilizer, but I would be really cautious with how much you're fertilizing and how much fertilizer you're using on these, because they can be sensitive to the buildup of salts and things that are in your fertilizer. Really, you should be fertilizing a Paph orchid about once a month. And I would highly recommend that whatever fertilizer you're choosing to use, whether it's just a balanced fertilizer or orchid fertilizer, that you read the label and you dilute the fertilizer by at least half. I would even go like a quarter strength, especially when you're starting out with a plant that you're not familiar with. I would go quarter strength, whatever the label is telling you, because oftentimes these plants can be a little bit sensitive and they can actually burn. And I know this from firsthand experience because I myself have caused damage to this orchid by over-fertilizing it. So super weak fertilizer once a month. That should do the trick. Okay, let's talk about the soil. So although Paph orchids are actually terrestrial orchids, they are not epiphytic orchids like your classic Phalenopsis that would literally just be attached to a tree somewhere in its native habitat. These guys are basically found in forest leaf litter. We actually don't grow Paphiopedilums in soil. You're gonna wanna use a mix of bark chips, perlite, volcanic rocks, maybe some charcoal in there depending on your water quality, but no actual soil is in this. They are slow growers, so you don't have to repot them too often, but it is a good idea to repot them every 1 or 2 years. So Paphiopedilums are fantastic plants. They're easy care, they're great for beginners, they have beautiful foliage and a super unique flower. They're not even that picky when it comes to temperature or humidity. They like room temperature and maybe about 40% humidity. But to be honest, my house ranges anywhere from 60 to 20, and they seem fine. You are so beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today. And until next time, my name is Sam, this is Mind the Leaves. Take care of your plants and yourself.
If you found this video helpful, please go ahead and plant your finger on that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video.
I mean, just look at these leaves.